We have some updates for you today because, believe it or not, the school year will start soon, and we want you to be prepared with the latest and greatest in terms of legal updates. And Kevin and I are going to handle this in sort of a question and answer format. I'm going to try to guess the questions that you most need answers to, and Kevin's going to try to answer those. So I sure am glad I'm the one asking and not answering, Kevin. So I know the topic they're all anxious to hear about, Kevin, is COVID. Even though we would all like to believe it's over with, there are still some lingering issues that I know will pop up in the 2021-22 school year. That's a mouthful. So let's start out, Kevin, and let's just talk about vaccine requirements. Can you share some updates with us on that?
Yeah, so the question that's really going across the country is, can my employer require me to be vaccinated? And that is a developing question. There are developing answers to it. The latest thinking nationally in the short answer is probably so. Just as an employer has been allowed to require vaccinations if required for an essential business purpose, since the onset of smallpox, employers have generally been allowed to do this. But there are, overlaid on top of what we have known nationally for a half a century are some new laws being passed, and I think one in Texas where it may ban the requirement of vaccinations by state entities and local governmental entities like a school district. So it's a developing issue. TEA has on their website just a couple of months ago said that vaccinations will be voluntary, left up to the individual, especially while the vaccines, and this is key, while the vaccines are still authorized under that emergency use authorization. That in some legal quarters, it's argued that it cannot be required while the vaccines are authorized under emergency use. But when that flips, and I don't know when that's going to flip, but when that flips, the legal analysis may change. In some, probably the employer can require it. In Texas, that maybe not. TEA is suggesting that school districts cannot. But that's one that certainly a decision that will be made above the campus level. And I think you need to look to your school district's legal team for guidance on that, because that's going to continue to develop.
Right. And I know with students as well, Kevin, that's a question on all of our minds as well. What about vaccine requirements for students, understanding the whole emergency use authorization piece that comes into play. And then also, I think a comment that I've heard recently is just, students already have an opportunity, if you will, to opt out of vaccinations. And will that continue to be an option, for students who have religious reasons or other reasons for opting out of vaccinations? Do you have anything to say about that?
Well, I think it's probably the same analysis, that the school could require this vaccination as it can, and to the degree it can, other vaccinations. And you name two exceptions to whether it's an employee or a student, and that would be a particularized health concern or a religious objection. I think are the two known exceptions to the requirements for an employer or like the school district requiring a student to get this kind of any kind of vaccination.
Right. Okay, moving on from vaccinations, let's talk PPE, mask, plexiglass, contact tracing. What are your thoughts about that in the new school year?
Yeah, so vaccinations is one thing, and now what do we do about masks going forward? The governor just signed a new executive order, GA34, which has said that GA36 says school systems cannot require students or staff to wear a mask. Now, it doesn't speak to other PPEs. And I think going forward, those are largely going to be left to school district discretion. It would seem advisable to me that let's take what worked in the non-intrusive parts of the PPEs that continued to work this past school year. Let's keep them in place. If we've invested in plexiglass and they're non-intrusive and people are used to them and it keeps colds down, why not keep that kind of thing open? You know, when this past school year started, it was by government, by the governor's order, school districts were required to have a plan to reopen published on their homepage of their website. And throughout this entire school year, any kind of COVID questions that came up, that was the first thing I went to. What does the local plan say? And we should hold the district to its local plan. I mean, no matter if you're a parent, a student, a teacher, or a principal, if the district's going to say it, then we need to hold them to it. I don't know what becomes to those, quote, roads to reopening. They're called variety of marketing things from district to district. I'm not sure if that's going to be required for the coming school year, but many of those pieces, I think even TEA says, continue to look to CDC for reasonable guidance to keep people healthy and safe through the school year. Even if masks can no longer be required, certainly individuals could continue to choose to wear their masks, even if not for COVID, but it seems to be anecdotally that everyone suffered fewer flus and colds over the last year as well. So maybe that's a piece we keep going forward with. It seems if you have employees or students who continue to be real concerned about their health as it relates to these other, non-vaccination questions, or doesn't have to do with vaccinations or masks, but these other things, I think, take the path of least resistance. Seems to make sense to me.
Yeah, right. And I know a big question, particularly for elementary principals, has to do with contact tracing. That was a very complicated thing that took place, trying to monitor which students were in contact with other students, that sort of thing. So what about contact tracing and notifying parents when someone tests positive? Any thoughts on that?
That again is going to go. Let me say what the latest TEA guidance is. It just issued this week. First of all, if the school has a known positive case, the school still has to notify the local health authorities, city or county. Right. The school still has to make a report to the Texas Department of State Health Services, and there's an online form. I believe that was done all this past school year, and that carries forward to the current school year. Notifying parents and the school community and colleagues, I believe, still falls under best practices from CDC guidance. And I think schools will be advised to do that. Now, whether they're required by law to make these kinds of notifications to staff and families, I'm candidly a little unclear about going forward. Now, those were required in their back to the plan to reopen that were all required for last year. If those same plans are not required this year, and that's where we saw those notification requirements, I'm not sure if those same notification requirements carry forward. But it seems to be best practices, being mindful of confidentiality. The way we were last school year when we had positive cases. It seems to me to be very reasonable to contact staff and families and report positive cases, just like we did last year, being mindful of confidentiality, et cetera.
Right, right. And I do think it's just sort of a good time to say again, you've mentioned it already a couple of times, but to remind principals and school leaders, look to your district guidance, look to your district's plan, make sure you are following your district's policy and your district protocol with relationship to these things. That's important for your own job security, but also for the health and safety of your staff and your students. One last thing, Kevin, I think this is a newer thing. I don't think we dealt with this at the conclusion of last school year, but now that I walked into a bank several weeks ago, and the bank had a big sign out front that said, all of our employees have been vaccinated for your safety. And every employee in the bank had a button on that said, I've been vaccinated for your safety. We know there's some vaccination shaming going on. What's a principal to do when they get a complaint from a parent that says, well, I know my child's teacher is not vaccinated? And I know there's not a law on this. There's no, but give us some practical legal guidance here. What are you going to do when the parent comes in and complains that their child's teacher is not vaccinated?
That's a good one, Trey. Thanks for that one. It seems to me, hey, so I've seen the question out there in our Texas school community, some school districts asking its employees, do you plan to get vaccinated or are you vaccinated? And there's that's a fuzzy gray issue, but I think people are leaning toward the fact that the employer can at least ask those questions and may have a health interest in asking that question and collecting that data. But that data must be confidential, cannot be individualized. So the school district can report we have such X% of our staff is vaccinated, et cetera, but can't say Mrs. Smith in the kindergarten room chose not to get vaccinated. So I'm not sure how a parent would know that unless Mrs. Smith is wearing a shirt that says proud anti-vaxxer. I mean, I'm not sure how that gets to the kids and gets back up to the front office, but we know people talk and there's social media. Absolutely. So let's just assume that people are going to know that. As a principal, as a manager of a campus, I mean, I think you have to deal with this and look into it. If the teacher's not violating any rule or law, then I think you got to back the teacher. And, if the parent wants the kid moved, then we try to find a path of least resistance for that. But I think you just have to use your best Secretary of State diplomacy skills on those kinds of tricky questions. And also, I do think, because so much of this is a little up in the air, make sure you're running this up the flagpole to central office on these kind of thorny, legalistic, health, confidential kinds of questions that people can get really upset about. Let's run them up the flagpole. The teacher could get upset about it. The parent's going to get upset about it and put it on social media. Cover yourself, and let's take a team approach to resolving these sticky questions.
Right. I do think this is an issue that's probably going to rear its head. I anticipate that for principals. So I know that handling it appropriately and professionally and confidentially, all the while trying to ensure a parent that you have their child's safety and well-being at heart. That's a challenge. That's not an easy task for a campus principal. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And I do think it's completely expected that some parents going to say, I want my child moved from a teacher's classroom because of it. I think a principal can expect that. Okay, well, let's leave COVID and let's talk about some of the back to school issues we deal with as school leaders, particularly related to T-tests and TPES. I know we have some important things that we need to make sure we cover at the beginning of the school year. So I think it's always helpful for a rundown of those, if you can help with that.
Sure. Well, let's look at T-tests first. First of all, especially if you're a new administrator to this district, make sure you know what system your district's using. Districts can opt out of T-tests. With the districts of innovation, they're opting out of a whole bunch of stuff. Find out, it's like one of the first inquiries when I get a case is to see, I have to check my, knowledge of school law against District of Innovation who may have opted out of some piece that I've been used to, arguing about for years. So know which system your school district's using. And if it's T-test, some of the very, beginning of the year things we've got to do is give teachers, um, provide each teacher with an orientation within the first 3 weeks of school. If the teacher's new to the district, the teacher's never been appraised under T-test, or the district policy regarding T-test, maybe some of the local flavoring of it has changed from last year to this coming year. And you've got to do that within the first 3 weeks of school, and it must be face-to-face. It can't be online. Now, this rule was written pre-pandemic, but hopefully when we get back in the fall, yes, face-to-face will mean face-to-face, and that's the kind of thing we have to set up. And also for T-tests, the district must adopt an appraisal calendar. Now, as a lawyer for teachers and principals, and when I'm in an evaluation case, I want the calendar. I want to see what the district has said are the timelines for the many, many things that must take place throughout the year for a teacher's evaluation. And as a campus administrator, as a certified appraiser, you want that calendar. You really want it handy, and you want to make sure it's that district calendar is transferred to your personal professional calendar, and you make the timelines. We've had too many cases come through TEPSA over the years where principals just get behind, and it's the end of the year and we haven't done our walkthroughs, we haven't done the summative in time, et cetera, et cetera. And that's sort of handing the district a pretty easy write-up, if not more, to the campus administrator, and we certainly want to avoid that. So with TPES, it's very similar to T-test, and you should go to your policy DNB, Daniel Nancy Boy, legal and local, and read up on that, especially if you're a new administrator. You might have taught for 20 years, but you're going to be a new assistant principal this year or principal. You need to review TPES, and in fact, the district is required to give you the same orientation as a new administrator as it does to the new teachers with T-test. So I'll leave it there.
Yeah. And Kevin, this is a good time for me to sort of just say emphatically to all campus leaders, know your district's policy. I take calls every single day, and the first thing I'll ask is, well, what does your policy say? And I'm shocked by how many campus administrators have never opened their district policy manual. So here's a strong admonition to every campus leader. That policy manual is your best friend. It can answer so many of your questions that you have and give you great guidance. So not only do they need DNA and DNB, they just need that whole manual to be their guide for sure. Let's change gears.
Yeah, if I may, just not to belabor the point, but principals, APs, know how to find the policies. It's pretty easy. Homepage of your school district's website, usually school board tab, and then you'll find district policies, and then it unpacks them, and they're broken up, and you can learn almost anything. So know where to find them quickly, and it's a world of information. Sorry, go ahead.
You don't even need a school law class. Just know where your policy online is. So,
right.
Kevin, I know you've already brought up social media, and I mentioned it as well, as far as, the parent that's going to go online and complain about COVID or complain about whatever. But I think it's a good thing at the beginning of each school year that campus leaders do some reminders with their school staff about social media. So what advice might you give to campus principals and leaders about this topic, which is it is getting larger and larger all the time?
It's hard to rein it in. Let me be flip and say, folks, let's just go back to Chili's on Friday afternoons and have some iced tea and vent about your workday with 2 or 3 of your friends at a booth, and leave your phones in your car. Can we just go back to the way that was? Because that's a time-honored tradition. Yeah. Employees, parents, principals have a right to gripe about their job with their friends in a small setting with a trusted group of people. But when we put it out there for the entire world to see, it just changes everything. Mm-hmm. It's irretrievable. and it just continues to do damage. So it's a complex topic. We don't have time to go into all of it, but keep mindful of this. Employees first, principals, APs, teachers, and others at least need to be professional with your social media accounts, diplomatic. Don't post things unbecoming of the position that you hold. With that said, you've got some First Amendment rights. We can't unpack all of that today. People have a right to express their opinions about matters of public concern as citizens.
Right.
But if you did that and used foul language, well, then it's a real toss-up, right? The school has, I think, a pretty good argument that you need to be professional, even though you are a citizen expressing First Amendment rights. So a lot of competing interests. It's difficult. Again, go back to Chili's. The parents, we can't control them. We can semi-control our teachers and staff and principals and APs. We can control them because they're employees. But these angry parents are angry parents. We can't fire them. We can't expel them. They also have First Amendment rights, and arguably probably broader First Amendment rights than even employees. I'm trying to like really compress these complex thoughts. Employees have First Amendment rights. If you want to quit your job, you can say whatever you want to, right? Pretty much, other than, yelling fire in a crowded theater. You can say whatever you want, but if you want to keep your job, you've got some limitations. Parents don't have those limitations, and they can say a whole bunch to criticize their public servants, their public government, and they get a lot of latitude to do that, and reining them in is difficult at best. Really don't have a way of unpacking that here. Obviously, if a parent accuses you of, say, child abuse, and it's a fabrication, not a kernel of truth in it, you might want to talk to a lawyer about what could be done about this parent's defaming you. But it's a complex question, and I'm afraid, my general response to a principal who's getting burned on social media by an angry parent is, it kind of comes with the territory. I'm sorry. We live in a busy news cycle, and you might want to wait it out, let this parent flame out, especially if the board doesn't really believe the parent. The parent only has a few comrades over here, and the public doesn't really buy what the parent's saying. Then let this person have their say. And if you hire a lawyer to go after them, it may be putting gas on the fire. Right. Every case is different, and there could be exceptions.
Yeah. I think, just a general reminder to school staff to keep it professional and to recognize any post you put out there, regardless of the platform, somebody is going to see it. And if it's not professional, it's not going to help you. And I think reminding our staff, especially, I always had young teachers on my campus, and it seems like the younger they are, perhaps the more reminders they might need about that very topic. Although no one's immune. And so I think just being cautious about that. Kevin, in our final minutes, let's talk real briefly about House Bill 870. Oh, sorry, you got numbers backwards. Now it's my turn. House Bill 785 that is currently on the governor's desk for signature. We anticipate it will be signed. We cannot cover in detail, and I'm going to just say to all my principal friends right now, you need to stay tuned to this, because any bill related to special education students is going to have a lot of detail in it, and you're going to want training on this bill once the governor signs it. So be tuned in for it and be watching for it and be asking your special education department about it. But Kevin and I real quickly want to run through the 4 major components of this bill just briefly to let you kind of know what's on the radar so you'll be prepared for it. So Kevin, start with BIPs.
Okay, we'll start with the Behavioral Intervention Plan, the BIP. If it's in an IEP, then the ARD committee has to review it annually or more frequently. But the law goes a little farther and says that the ARD committee must consider changes in circumstances that may impact the student's behavior as well as safety of the student and others. And the circumstances that the ARD must consider would include changes of placement, an increase or persistence in disciplinary actions, a pattern of unexcused absences, or an unauthorized or unsupervised departure from school. So it makes it more specific.
Right, right. And along those same lines, let me give everybody a heads up about restraint. And I know that is not a favorite topic or chore for any campus leader. We want to avoid restraints at just the best we can. We want to try to avoid those, but we also know sometimes they are unavoidable. So let me just give everybody a heads up about they are going to be adding rules. The commissioner will be adding rules if this House bill is signed about restraint that requires a written notice to parents of each incident. Now, there are already existing rules that require this. So this is not new, but what is new is the amount of detail that is going to be expected in those restraint notices to parents. So we've been notifying parents of restraints, but there's going to be increased detail. What does that mean for a campus principal? Then there's probably additional details you're going to need to be collecting if you're going to be providing those details to the parent. So we want to pay attention to that and be expecting, I would suspect, a new form from TEA to help us with that. So, and along the lines of timeout, another issue we deal with special needs students. Kevin, what about the changes there?
So for students with a behavioral intervention plan, a BIP, schools will be required to document each use of timeout prompted by a behavior of the student specified in the student's plan, including a description of the behavior that prompted the timeout. Right. Okay, that's a new requirement. Let me very quickly remind you that of a Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decision that was actually just reissued June of 2020, a year ago, about timeout. And just, I'm not going to drill down, but let you know that in this case, this student, a fifth grade student, was given what they call take 5 or take 10. Come sit at this desk in the classroom, but just a certain desk over here. You're still in the class with your peers, and you're going to choose your activity, which is still on task, but this is a special take 5 or take 10 desk. And the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals said that that was a timeout under Texas law. Right. That was required to be in the IEP and the BIP. You can pull the TEPSA news article from January, February 2020. That's when we first wrote about that case, but the Fifth Circuit revised their opinion in June of 2020. So it's an interesting developments about timeout.
So in keeping with discipline, as you can tell, this House Bill 785 is all about discipline. So we've talked about BIPs, we've talked about restraint, we've talked about timeout. So we need to just briefly alert everyone that with disciplinary changes of placement, let me just make a note here that if the school makes a change of placement because of discipline, so a disciplinary change of placement, the school must seek consent from the parent to conduct an FBA if one has never been done, or if the existing one is more than a year old. Of course, a review of the FBA and the BIP before making that disciplinary change of placement, develop a BIP or revise the existing one, and these things have to take place within 10 school days of the change of placement. Now, we've already had the manifestation determination requirement. That's been in law for a very long time, but what we see here is that this bill is going to change some of the specific pieces we need to review and address as a part of that MDR, that manifestation determination review. So here, campus principals, my encouragement to you as someone who sat in the special ed director's chair previously, you need to work very closely with your special education staff. You need to work very closely with your campus diagnostician or whoever runs the ARD committees on your campus to be prepared, to be well prepared as you enter into an ARD committee for an MDR on a kid. Just you want to make sure you've got all your ducks in a row and you're prepared to review and discuss that you have all the required components. So again, this bill has not been signed yet, but we anticipate that it will. And of course, training will come and new forms will come. So everybody, we just wanted to give you a heads up and get you to stay tuned on that issue. We are out of time, Kevin, but I think we've given them more than enough to think about as they begin their new school year. You have any parting words for our campus leaders, Kevin?
Oh, my only parting words, I left out the name of that case I just referred to. It's Spring Branch ISD versus OW. So if you're interested, you could Google that case. My only parting words were, I can't believe we made it through the 2021 school year. We did. Congratulations. Let's hope for the best for the 2021-22 school year. I've got my hopes up.
Yeah. Oh, I can't agree more, Kevin. Just our principals, our campus leaders did a phenomenal job with an unprecedented, incredibly hard task. I mean, never before have school leaders been expected to do the things that were done this school year. So very proud of our Texas team and how they led this year. I just want to say to everybody watching, we're here for you. We are here for you on a daily basis. TEPSA is, and that's what your membership pays for, is to have access to legal assistance. You call the TEPSA office, you're going to talk to me, not Karen Terry, me, Trey Kendrick, or Kevin. You're going to talk to one of us, and we are glad to help, and we are certainly cheering you on. Stay tuned. Kevin writes a legal article in every single TEPSA news, so check out your TEPSA news on a regular basis. He's giving you the latest and greatest in tips and making sure that you stay on a safe legal basis. So just stay tuned to that as well. And there are also so many resources available on the TEPSA website to help you. So Kevin will see you back at the Assistant Principals Conference, which will be coming up very soon in the fall. We wish you all a wonderful summer, and we'll see you next year. Kevin, thanks for being online with me today. Bye, everyone.